when I joined, we were in Charlotte Street, which was the original office. And the step, which we still have in reception, had "Nothing's Impossible" on it. And you walked over it, and it just made me feel that anything is possible in terms of what you personally can do, what you can achieve yourself. Because, I was suddenly the creative director of Saatchi London. I'd only ever been the creative director of small creative boutiques. And this was sort of the most famous agency. And here I was, and I was a bit overwhelmed, by the responsibility of it. We always think that phrase, which has been part of what I would say DNA of Saatchi's, means maybe something personally different to different people, but also to our attitude to work and also our attitude to what's possible with clients. And we also help them think about what is their impossible challenge for their business. And I think when you think about that, you don't just think about what you think your task is today. It makes you go, think beyond. And when you aim a bit further, you can achieve a bit more. And it's great because you then have to, if you achieve what you thought was impossible, you have to do a new impossible. And you keep going. So, and I think it's never ending, but it's very much sort of an attitude within the people that work here, and a belief, but also a strategic framework for us to think about how we can help our clients face really impossible challenges. And God, right now, in the world where businesses are facing exponential change. There was one of my favourite ever ads was, I think, done by Lucas Delaney for Adidas, and it was running, and it was to the next lamppost, to the next lamppost. So when you get to your goal, there's always another goal. So for me, that's what Nothing's Impossible it is. It's always aiming a bit further than you thought you could. Diversity for me has always been fundamental to a creative business. If you think about what we do, we are about finding sort of less obvious solutions and original thinking. We're about communicating to a totally diverse audience. And so if we don't have that diversity within ourselves and within ourselves as a business, how are we expected to be able to communicate to those different diverse audiences? So different experiences, and I don't just mean black or white, male or female, or they. I don't mean, there is neurodiversity. It's just there is physical ability, disabilities. All those experiences bring a different outlook on life and give you your voice. And one of the things I think I am a huge believer in, and I think it's happening more now than it ever did, because when I started, I was like the only female creative in a creative department, and you were kind of a bit of a token. And I think now we recognize that people can share their own voice, and it's okay. And actually, that's what we want. We want people to put themselves into the work. We want them to bring themselves to work. We want them to share what their own experiences are in order to make all of our work better. And just to make us, better, more understanding people and more insightful. So for me, it's a fundamental of a creative business specifically, but it's fundamental to all business, I think. I think it's really interesting. Is it nature or nurture? Are you born with it or can you develop it? I think the answer is a bit of both. It's funny because my son has just turned 18 and he's gone to art college. And, my husband said to me, "Oh God, what if he ends up doing advertising?" I was going, "It's not that bad. It's great." But I think, and by the way, my dad was in advertising as well, so he'd be like the third generation of Leo Burnett's. Yes, so it's he'd be the third generation. But I think creativity is something that you are born with, but I think you learn the skills as well, and you learn by experience, and you learn by inspiration, and you learn by the people you mix with and the conversations you hear. You learn by stimulation. You learn by, but you can't do that unless you're already interested in it. One of the things with trying to get more diverse people into our business is trying to help young people see that they have a skill that this business wants. And it might not be obvious. It might not be an obvious skill, but very often we find people with dyslexia, find like me, they find themselves here, and you feel at home here because you suddenly realize the way you think is an advantage because you're inbuilt problem solver really quickly in a really unusual way. That becomes a skill, which in other businesses might not be, so it's almost an unfair advantage in a creative industry like this. You can look at our industry and go, what is its future? Because we're changing so quickly. I think that's what's really exciting, because I come back to what are the core things that we do in our industry? We solve problems in a way that is engaging for other people. It encourages other people to come to that product, come to that service. That's a skill that can be used for so many things, So I think our notion of advertising might change, and what advertising does changes. And at the moment, if you look at what you do in Saatchi's in Kiev and what we do in the Saatchi offices, here in London and all over, a lot of what we do isn't what people think we do. People think Saatchi's is quite a traditional advertising agency. Actually, when you look at what you do, you sit shoulder to shoulder with your clients, and you work out what their huge challenges are, and you help solve them. And sometimes that ability to simplify is actually what we do. It's not necessarily producing a commercial that we put on television, but sometimes it is. I think clients are essential to the process. I think, and because I think, certainly what we do, without a client, what are you doing? And I think that partnership is really a unique and brilliant partnership because you bring different forces together. A client will bring an incredible knowledge of what they are and what they think they are. And we bring a knowledge of kind of how that is perceived in the outside world. So those are really interesting forces already coming together. So I think that partnership is essential, and it's actually where the magic happens, where you find yourself in different places. And it's that conversation that you have when you kind of make a suggestion and someone goes, well, no. And then you go, but what about more like that? And they go, oh, maybe. And already what you thought you were doing in a straight line has gone off over there and is already more interesting and maybe sharper. So I think that is really important. Being brave, I don't think there is such a thing as brave. I think what there is we are in a world that is changing exponentially. The brave person does nothing. That's the really brave person, sits back and doesn't do anything. The reasonable person is radical. I think, and now that is very easy to say because our clients are often sitting, they might be a a CMO working with us, but they have to go back into the business that kind of doesn't understand what they're doing, and sometimes can think that they're just being, flaky. So we have to help them. We have to help them look like what they're doing is the most rational, reasonable thing that needs to be done, and it's an imperative. But I do think change is scary for everyone, all of us in business, all of us in life. When you're faced with something you don't know is scary. But I think the only thing I know is if you don't change, then you are in trouble, I think it's interesting, the relationship with art and advertising, so is advertising an art form in itself? Yes, I think so. But is it art? I think it's quite interesting. So it's interesting when you look at advertising of old and how we now, perceive it. So you might look at a Toulouse-Lautrec poster. You might say that's art because maybe time has said it's art. Or there was, I think it was like in 1880, that in the UK, the Pears soap used a painting of a bubble little boy, and that was a famous painting, and they made it, they printed it and made it an advert. So you're plagiarizing art sometimes. So there's that relationship with it. I always think there's for me, the difference though is we do applied art. Sort of, I think in the creative industries are often about applying our art and our craft to a challenge, a commercial challenge. Whereas I think art is different. Art is something that comes from someone, and it's an expression of something, and it's not meeting a commercial challenge. So for me, those are very distinct differences. But can you view it as art? I think you can certainly view it as an art form and a craft that come with it. And when you see, amazing graphic design, it becomes art in a form, definitely. So it's always that relationship, and I think it's always about the source of the idea. If the ideas come from approaching a commercial challenge, for me that is an applied art, and if it's come from the desire to communicate, a strong desire to communicate something, that's art. I think brands increasingly recognize purpose, and I think it's quite interesting when you talk about a brand purpose, and that often there is another mission at play. So I think you will find brands that are passionate about how do we create a more sustainable process. That's activism. How do we make sure that we are diverse and hear multiple voices and express multiple voices? I think brands are very able to do that, and actually very powerful in doing that. One of the things they can do in their daily life is to make sure that they represent the world properly. And underrepresented groups become more represented, and advertising is an amazing form of activism for that. It's soft activism, but it's activism. However, supporting local community, that's activism. Supporting local business is activism in a way against global powers. So there is a sort of sense that small local businesses trying to reach a broader audience, that's activism as well. It is, because I think we all need to be, because then the world is a better place and we all play our part in it. and brands like everyone else. And as individuals, it's about being decent citizens, and brands are citizens of the world, and they should do the right thing. So I do think it is important. I also think it's important when you look at young talent coming into your business, they want to know you're doing the right thing, because they're quite vocal about that. And if you are a brand that they don't feel shares their values, they don't want to work with you. And if you are a brand that don't share their values as a consumer, they don't want to buy from you. So I think it's very, it's important commercially. Mm-hmm. And I think there is such a thing as, we're moving into an era where there used to be a perspective where you do good and then you do business. Now doing good business is doing good. Of course we're cooler, Costa. I think it's really interesting. And I think actually a healthy ecosystem in any market has independence. I worked in 3 small local boutiques, maybe not that small, but in London. And I loved it. And I thought, there's no way I want to work at a big agency like Saatchi Saatchi. It's too big. I walked through the door and I fell in love with it. And I fell in love with it because it's not really different. But what it has is a global perspective. And there might be some networks that are not as cool, actually. But Saatchi's, for me, is all about being a collection of independent boutiques. So you have the best of both worlds. You're operating as a creative and strategic boutique, but you have a collective DNA in Nothing's Impossible and spirit, and you have a resource behind you of, in the case of the Saatchi network, maybe 6,000 people, but behind that you have the network of the Publicis Group, which is 80,000 people. So you're the front door, and if you don't have that skill set in your office, in your business, there will always be someone that you can get hold of to be part of your team, and that expertise. So it's sort of like a win-win. And I think if you are a young creative, you've got the benefit of, for me, why am I still here doing it? Because I love learning. Every day I learn, and I learn from the youngest people joining, and I learn from the people that are building whole infrastructures. A world I don't know, but I'm interested in it. And I think being curious and interested, and if you are, then why wouldn't you find the fact that you've got more opportunities available to you more exciting? So, and we've just launched a thing within the Publicis Group. So if you join a Publicis agency, but specifically Saatchi's because we're cooler, you can work anywhere in the world for 6 weeks. And that experience is incredible. Wow. So you can go off and work in New York or go to Sao Paulo, have that experience of working somewhere else. You don't get that in a small local boutique.
That's true. And that's the benefit.
That is the benefit.
Yeah.
So there's certain pieces of work that I've done at a certain time that feel that they kind of reflect my approach. A piece of work that we did maybe 10 years ago here for T-Mobile, which was a flash mob in Liverpool Street Station. One, I kind of don't like to make things easy. Is my personal aesthetic. So it's trying something new that hasn't been done. And in the case of the flash mob, that was to do something really ambitious. We had 6 weeks to do it. We did it in a public space that had all sorts of challenges in terms of health and safety. We got 300 people dancing to 10 tracks that we had to buy, famous tracks. And then we got everyone that happened to be in the station joining in. And we made a 3-minute film that took over a break. It aired within 24 hours of making it. We got all the press down, so it was in all the newspapers. And then we made print and radio and podcast and direct and in-store and so forth and so forth. And it was a social campaign. It was kind of the first for me of kind of recognizing that you've made something, you've done an event, and then you've created a conversation with the audience that then we carried on. And so it was kind of reacting live to the response. I think it is Nothing's Impossible, which is maybe why I was attracted to Saatchi's and Saatchi's to me. So it's quite interesting. I've got 2 books on the go at the same time. And one is, I think it's called it's called The Lonely Century. That's what it's called. And it's brilliant. It's a fascinating book. I mean, because it's about our need for connection. And it was written sort of, it's come out sort of during the pandemic, but it wasn't written about the pandemic. It was a way that technology is forcing us to go, that we have become much more insular, bizarrely, even though we have all this connection available to us. And finding kind of projects within how we organize our environments, our cities, and ourselves. So to try and make ourselves less lonely. And then the other book I have on the go at the same time is, it's called Light and Mirrors, and it's the third in a trilogy written by Hilary Mantel, and it's started with Wolf Hall, and it's about Thomas Cromwell, who was the sort of right-hand man of Henry VIII. And it's fiction, but based on incredibly detailed sort of research into the period. And the thing I love about that is what I want to do next is go back to college and study history. So that's my stepping stone into that. So they're my 2 things that sort of probably say a lot about me.